Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of The Log Show here on YouTube. How is everyone doing today? As we have wrapped up NFL Week 6. Last time I was here on Tuesday, the Yankees were still alive in the MLB playoffs. That has since died as they lost last week. 6 in the NFL. That changes so much. You look now in week 6 as we get towards this middle point of the season, you start to actually look at that playoff picture. As much as some teams were a surprise, being 5-1 at this point in the season is huge. Being 4-2 at this point in the season is huge. And being 1-5 is being in a gigantic hole. So a lot of teams are in wild spots that we have not expected, like the Baltimore Ravens sitting at 1-5 with Lamar Jackson out, and on the other side of it, you have teams like the Indianapolis Colts sitting at 5-1. So that was huge. Obviously, you have the Giants upsetting the Eagles. The Eagles fall in back-to-back games on the short week. The Giants get a huge win after that loss, very, very ugly loss to the Saints in week 5. In week 6, they get it done. So that was great. Not only that, obviously, like I said, the Yankees, that's huge. So what's coming up for them? Week 7 is coming up. Week 7 is a huge week. A lot of teams on buys, but like I said, as we hit this midpoint of the season, every game's important at this point, especially for those teams that are 3-3 or worse. Every single game means something from this point on. So to see what, Mahomes and the Chiefs sitting at 3-3 after a big win have coming up, and all guys, so much for tuning in. If you haven't, please like and subscribe. So, I'll start the day with the biggest news, or not the biggest news, but the oldest news, realistically, in New York here, as we've sat on it for almost a full week now, and the New York Yankees were eliminated by the Toronto Blue Jays last Wednesday in a loss. They lost the series 3-1 in that ALDS, and they were sent home, sent to Cancun, just with, sitting alongside Juan Soto and the Mets now. With this team having so much hope, so much ups and downs throughout the season, the question is, did this really surprise anyone after they struggled playing against their division in the AL East this whole year, especially in Toronto, in the Rogers Center? They struggled so heavily this year, sat with the playoffs at a total record this year of 8-4 against Toronto. All of those wins Toronto with an 8-4 record against the Yankees. All 4 of the Yankees wins coming at home against the Toronto Blue Jays. So, once this series went back to Toronto, I feel a lot of people felt that it was over for the New York Yankees. But as we sit here a week later, I don't want to sit here and harp on the losses and the what could have beens, as Aaron Judge played well and finally in a playoffs, and it seemed like nobody around him picked up the pieces, especially in that Toronto series. In that Boston series, we did see a lot of people pick up those pieces around Aaron Judge. Especially in that game 3 when you have Schlittler do what he does through those 7 innings in that Boston series. But in Toronto, it just seemed like Aaron Judge played well outside of that one game. He goes 0-for-3. Everyone's going to talk about that one at-bat in game 2 in Toronto with bases loaded in the 3rd inning, no outs. That's going to be harped on for a while because of the player that Aaron Judge is. But nonetheless, when you look at it, Aaron Judge did play pretty well in this playoffs for the New York Yankees, something that has been plaguing him for a while. And just around Aaron Judge, there were none of those pieces really showed up today. This playoffs, especially in that Toronto season. Bellinger played well against Boston, but really died down against Toronto. The pitching was atrocious against Toronto. They were just hitting all over the field, pretty much choosing where they wanted the ball to go. And a Yankee team that had a lot of struggles this year, like I said. Does it surprise anyone that they couldn't get the job done against Toronto with as much hope as there was for this Yankees team? I don't feel like many people are surprised. But what you got to do now is look at the future. You can't sit here and look at the past. Sorry. I apologize for that there. Got something stuck in my throat here. But as I was saying, a week past the loss, you can't sit here and look at what could have been anymore. You now have to look at the future. So much has already happened for the Yankees talking about the offseason, even though we are still in the MLB playoffs with the ALCS and NLCS going on right now. You know, you already had Cody Bellinger opt out of this last year of his deal that would have paid him $27 million, I believe. So not only that, obviously Grisham, his contract's up. You have Devin Williams, who struggled this year. His contract's up. Ahmed Rosario, Jose Caballero, two people who were acquired at the trade deadline who played huge parts for the New York Yankees this year. Their contract is up. Paul Goldschmidt, what are you going to do at first base? So there's a lot of questions that are going to have to be addressed about this New York Yankee team going forward. Now, obviously, the big thing that everyone's going to look forward to and everyone's going to talk about going into this offseason is now going into next year, you have Gerrit Cole in this rotation, which everyone is going to be excited for, coming off Tommy John surgery, even with the coming off of Tommy John surgery. Everybody's going to love the fact that you have this veteran, this certified star in Gerrit Cole coming back into this rotation that has Max Fried, who had such a good year. Obviously had his downs, had a little slump there in the beginning of the year, didn't play well in game 1 or in game 3 against Toronto, but nonetheless, like I said, you have Max Fried coming in that rotation. You have Luis Gil finally with a fully healthy offseason, hopefully. You have Schlittler, who emerged as a star for the New York Yankees and is loved in this rotation. So for that starting rotation, there's so much to look forward to, but the questions arise first for the New York Yankees, I would say, in the outfield. It's what are you going to do with that outfield? As I said, you have Bellinger now officially a free agent as he has opted out of the last year of his deal. You have Trent Grisham, who was a big player for your team here, who opted out of his deal, or not opted out, who is a free agent now for the New York Yankees. These are two players, Bellinger with 29 home runs, Grisham with 34 home runs, two players who, especially in the regular season, were a huge impact to this New York Yankees lineup. Grisham was such an impact bat when he was hot, and Bellinger was a consistent bat over and over again, being second on the team in RBIs with 98 RBIs, having that 270 average, almost hitting 300. It was a big piece for this team to have that lefty bat that replaced Juan Soto. So I do think going into this offseason, obviously, as the New York Yankees, your number one priority here is getting Cody Bellinger back. I think there's no other route to look. Yes, you have Spencer Jones also in this outfield. That's why this outfield has so many questions, is because you have so many people there. It's not a lack of depth. It's honestly too much depth, where you have Spencer Jones that all the fans here are sitting wanting to call up with 34 home runs in his stint in AAA after he got called up. You have, obviously, Jason Dominguez, who was the one piece slighted this year, who didn't get as much playing time once he started to go on a slump this year. You have, obviously, Aaron Judge. And then you have these two pieces that you're going to have to decide between in Trent Grisham, who is a big impact bat, was able to bring that ball out of the yard, like I said, 34 times, a lot of big home runs, led the team in grand slams, was a huge impact bat, but also on the other side of the coin, you have Cody Bellinger, who batted, like I said, 270, had a very high OPS, was a very consistent bat for this team over and over again. And not only a consistent bat, someone who replaced what many thought would be a hole of missing Juan Soto in this lineup, that he kind of filled in my opinion, a lot better because of his defensive prowess as well. That's why I think that the number one priority list of this offseason is going to have to be re-signing Cody Bellinger. Because as much as I was willing to accept the loss of Juan Soto, I said that. If you guys go back to my show a year ago and go back to a lot of what I was saying a year ago, you see me saying that as much as I love Juan Soto, when he signed that deal for all that money with the New York Mets, I said it was too much money. I was like, we're at a point where, $600 million for a player, you could spread that money around and go get pieces. And that's what the New York Yankees did with getting, obviously it wasn't expected when you got him in the trade, but you get Trent Grisham in that deal that also brought over Devin Williams. You go sign Cody Bellinger. You go sign Paul Goldschmidt. another impact bat who played well in the beginning or in the middle parts of the season. You know, you have these players who really were a big impact to your team that you went out and built an entire team around instead of spending $600 million on Juan Soto. So depending on the price that Cody Bellinger's asking or gets, obviously, you know, there's always a limit in my head on how much each player is worth, depending on how the free agent class is. And you look around and see what is possible to build your team if you lose X player. And I saw that last year with losing Juan Soto. I saw a lot of opportunities to maybe, you know, you didn't get everyone I wanted. I wanted maybe a Bregman or a re-sign of Glaber and a couple pieces who did play well elsewhere this year that didn't end up in a Yankee uniform, but you still did what I very much wanted last offseason with the signing of Bellinger and getting all those pieces that you very much needed. So obviously, is there a too high to pay for Bellinger? I think there is, but I think he has to be at the top of your list, and you have to be willing to overpay for him slightly with the impact that not only his bat made this year, as I brought up multiple times with the 270 average, the 98 RBIs, the 29 home runs, but also the defensive impact that Cody Bellinger had. Time and time again, I remember if I wasn't able to watch the game or if I was watching the game, you know, I look at my phone and it would be a big play by Bellinger in the outfield, a diving play, a sliding play, a great throw home, you know, over and over again, the defensive impact of Cody Bellinger came up so big for the New York Yankees time and time again, especially during the regular season, that I feel like Belly has to come back. I see what you're saying there, Vin, about Kyle Tucker also being a free agent. And I think they're very similar players, both players that played well in Chicago, that developed well in Chicago. But I think the rapport that you have in Bellinger and the ability that you have with Bellinger is bigger than you can get in Kyle Tucker. Bellinger has this odd ability that he's almost a utility player in a weird way. It's kind of crazy that he's not considered one amongst most people. But when you look at the way that Cody Bellinger plays, he can play all three of those outfield positions. He can play first base if you need him to. You know, he can play all over the field, really, when needed, and that's such a big piece, especially for the Yankees, as I was going to get into soon. You're losing Paul Goldschmidt, so first base going into this offseason is going to be a big hole. Do you re-sign Paul Goldschmidt? With the struggles that Austin Wells had, especially offensively last year, do you commit to Austin Wells and then maybe go with Ben Rice at first permanently and have that other lefty bat in the lineup? So that throws in a big hole too, and that's why I feel like Bellinger can be such a big piece for this team. Is if you re-sign him, is you don't have to have him play the outfield if you want to call up a Spencer Jones or you want to bring up someone else who is really talented and add that fourth outfielder if you don't want to re-sign Trent Grisham. And you'd rather bring up Spencer Jones for that and let the young player get his experience. The thing that obviously scares me about the whole Spencer Jones path, and that's why I could see a path where they re-sign maybe Trent Grisham, even with Belly, and bring back this whole outfield and maybe not bring back a first baseman, is Spencer Jones does have a huge strikeout problem. He led minor leaguers in strikeout. He had the highest strikeout rate among minor leaguers with at least 500 at-bats last year, despite having a 30-30 season. So the strikeout problems are big for Spencer Jones, and to see how that will result if he goes up to the major leagues, we will see. You know, that's something we're not going to be able to know how big of a problem it is, and honestly are so valuable for development for these players. But I think, honestly, if you're the New York Yankees, as much as this was up and down, defensively, not talking about the late rotation, not talking about relievers and closers, I do think you have to look to bring back a lot of pieces. I don't think I think in the playoffs it was a problem, but I don't think it was a big problem throughout the regular season offensively. I don't think anybody would look here and look at the Yankees offensively throughout this season and say that that was the issue. You know, obviously you had Volpe have his struggles, you had Wells have his struggles, but you found pieces that I think also should come back in those pieces where you have a Jose Caballero or a Ahmed Rosario come back who had big at bats in the postseason, who made big plays throughout the postseason. Um, the one contract I haven't looked up was Ryan McMahon. I don't know if he's a free agent this year, but that's another piece you have to look at if you want him back because he was such a big defensive piece throughout the team this year. I think where you have to be looking at making changes in the offseason if you're the New York Yankees is more obviously not the rotation. I think everybody with eyes who watched baseball, I don't think I'm some baseball savant for saying this sentence. The late game pitching for the New York Yankees was just absolutely atrocious. The fact that the minute, whether it was Fried, Rodon, Luis Gil, whoever it was that day, Tim Hill, if the starting pitcher was on and you saw this, you saw a good 5 or 6 innings out of the starting pitcher, and we could get into Boone in a little bit on the arguments of should Boone stay, because should he have taken, because he listens to the analytics and all this. But I think the real question is the pieces there. Luke Weaver took a huge step back in 2025. So did Devin Williams. The minute Camilo Doval put on a Yankee jersey, he played terrible. You got I can't even remember the guy's name that you get from Colorado. I'm blanking on his name. The guy you get from Colorado at the trade deadline who within a week is sent down to AAA and just absolutely terrible. So I think obviously anybody with eyes who watched the New York Yankees, playing all Yankee fans, at the minute a reliever came in the game, whether it was Luke Weaver, Devin Williams, Camilo Doval, Mark Leiter Jr., who gave up 8 home runs this year after giving up 10 home runs over the past 3. Like I said, Devin Williams, who gave up more runs this year than he had over his past 4 seasons in Milwaukee. You have all of that for the Yankees, and it's just, you can only do so much as an offense when these guys come into the game and you have a 3-0 lead and they give up a 4-run inning. Or a 3-run inning and the game is tied all of a sudden. And in baseball and all other sports, honestly, when you look at them, momentum is so huge, especially in major league sports and professional sports, where it's hard to remember sometimes how little the skill gap is in professional sports between these teams, especially 2 good teams. The skill gap is so small that these momentum and having this energy behind your team is such a big deal. You're seeing it in football right now with the New York Giants after that big win in Philadelphia, where you have this energy in the locker room. Those are the things that, I feel like a lot of people talk about it now, especially now that you see a lot more professional athletes getting into this media space and talking about sports. And they harp on the importance of energy and all of that in a game, in a locker room. And for the New York Yankees, you had so many games where you had the energy zapped out of your team because you had a pitcher come in and give up the lead or let a team inch back into the game, and you can't let that happen. So the top 2 priorities for the New York Yankees are, in my opinion, getting back Cody Bellinger and fixing this rotation. There's no other way around it. There were too many issues with the rotation, too many problems. And then on the other side, I think Cody Bellinger was the most impactful pickup that we had all year last year, without a doubt. So I think if you're the New York Yankees, that's what you have to look at. And then obviously the biggest conversation, anybody who listens to WFAN, anybody who reads the New York Times, anybody who pays attention to any lick of the New York Yankees knows that the biggest conversation now is Aaron Boone's job. Everybody wants Aaron Boone out of there. Everybody's sick of Aaron Boone. And I'm not going to say I'm not someone on that list. I've complained about Aaron Boone. You could ask the people close to me, for those of you who listen to this podcast who don't know me well. I've been calling for Aaron Boone's job for years. I have been. I've been on and on and on and on about Aaron Boone's job over the past year. I don't love the way that Aaron Boone managed a baseball game. I say, like I said before, talking about energy and all of that, I feel Aaron Boone doesn't want to feel that. I think he feels that the analytics tell you more than the energy of a game. And I feel the exact opposite. I feel that um, I live by the any dog has his day mentality, that every game is different. Every game is its own strategy. Um, in football, you get this comparison a lot that some people love, some people hate, but you get the comparison of sports and war. And, I feel like if you're gonna use that comparison, I love the analogy of the season is the war, but each game is its individual battle. You're not going to go into each battle with the same strategy. The dude who might not pitch well against this lineup historically might have a separate motivation going into this game. Something might have happened off the field. Something might have happened before the game that clicks in this guy's head that he's just on today. And time and time again, we've seen times with Aaron Boone, especially with pitchers, where we see that. And he takes him out of the game, even though it's like, oh, that guy could have gone for an eighth inning. That guy could have gone for a seventh inning. But when you look at the New York Yankees team, how much can I blame Aaron Boone? And how much can I blame the pitching coaching staff? And I understand that, yes, a lot of people are going to say, well, that's Aaron Boone's decision. That's the front office decision is how you get there. But, Aaron Boone didn't make Devin Williams do what Devin Williams did. It's not Aaron Boone's fault that Devin Williams fell off the face of the earth. It's not Aaron Boone's fault that Luke Weaver took 3 giant steps back this season after having a great 2024. None of that. It's not Aaron Boone's fault that the pieces that you go out as a front office and acquire during the offseason or during the trade deadline come to the Yankees and absolutely fall apart. That's not completely Aaron Boone's fault. So, for once in my life, I sit here and I try to defend Aaron Boone so much because am I this Aaron Boone love? Am I on the side of loving Aaron Boone? No. When you go on the list of top Aaron Boone haters, I'm probably top 15. I've complained about the dude time and time again, over and over and over again. But where my question lies at the end of the day about the whole firing Aaron Boone situation is until I see a clear candidate that I love that is a different style of manager, I'm not in on firing Aaron Boone. You see it so many times in positions in sports where, and going back to my football references, you see it a lot of time with the quarterback position in football where you're calling for a dude to lose his job before you find a guy who can do the job better. And you run into this situation where it's just why would we fire Aaron Boone if the replacement is gonna be Baron Oon? You know what I'm saying? The replacement's gonna be Aaron Boone in a mustache and glasses. It's gonna be the same guy. It's gonna be a patsy for Brian Cashman and the Yankees front office to do their bidding and play the game that they want to play. And again, I'm not an Aaron Boone supporter, but his job was saved when he beat Boston. And I feel like anybody who could take their biases out of it and can just think logically knew that his job was saved the minute they won in Game 3 against Boston. I don't think that there was any question against his job being saved when they won Game 3 in Boston. I think it was very clear at that point his job was saved. But you struggle in Toronto, but nonetheless, Aaron Boone outside of 2016 has had success as a New York Yankees manager. He's been to 3 ALCS. He's won a pennant. just what hurts so much as a Yankee fan is you're having the second longest drought in franchise history of a World Series. You know, it's been almost 20 years, and we're not used to that as Yankees fans. We're not used to the situation as Yankees fans to sit there and go, what why? Why are we not? It's been almost 20 years. It doesn't make sense to Yankees fans on why it's been almost 20 years, especially when you have a dude who's been the best player in baseball for the past 5 or 6 years. And I might be stretching that, but Yankee fans almost feel that it's been almost 5, 6 years that Aaron Judge has been this stud, been this star player in baseball. You know, the year he won Rookie of the Year was almost 10 years was 10 years ago now. That was the 2015 season that we saw the breakout of Aaron Judge and the Baby Bombers and that whole Yankees team. And now you're in a situation where going into next year that guy is going to be 34. The window is closing. So if you're going to fire Aaron Boone, you do it now. If not, we have to accept the fact that Aaron Boone will be the manager for the time coming. Until the Yankees have a collapse again like 2016 and don't make the playoffs, that's the only way I see Aaron Boone not making his job. Or if they collapse like they did this year and happen to get swept by Boston at home, then you can question Aaron Boone's job. But as long as he makes the playoffs and wins, the opportunity is there. The pieces are there. As much as I've hated on the guy, there is a point where I have to say, the players just have to produce. You can't keep falling flat, and we can't keep blaming Aaron Boone for the players falling flat. It's not completely his fault. Yes, do I agree that sometimes Aaron Boone is a little lackadaisical in the way that he gets on his players? Yes, I completely agree with that. Do I agree that sometimes Aaron Boone, you know, like I just it doesn't have this fire when his players aren't playing well and has this lack of aggressiveness to get in people's face? Yes, I do. But it's just a modern way of managing, and we're not used to it. We're not used to the modern way of managing, and it hasn't gotten us a World Series yet as Yankee fans. But I think you had a good opportunity with this team that if you bring back the right pieces, you rework that bullpen a little bit, you have a very, very real chance at winning a World Series in 2026, especially with Cole coming back, especially with, especially with Aaron Judge, with Cole coming back. If you bring back Bellinger, I feel like you do need to bring back the pieces or pieces similar to Ahmed Rosario and Jose Caballero. You know, you need those utility players for when a Volpe's not playing well, that you don't have to keep them in the lineup. You could give these players a fire under their ass also in that way, where Aaron Boone might not be the dude, as we've known over the past couple of years, that's going to get in Volpe's face and yell at him behind the scenes. But maybe if we have the room to sit Volpe like we did when we got Rosario and Caballero, that gives Volpe a little motivation to be like, damn, none of these guys want to sit on the bench. These are, professional athletes are the most competitive humans on the face of the planet. When Volpe gets sat for Caballero, it better light a fire under his ass, or he shouldn't be playing. It's that simple. It's that simple for the New York Yankees. And as the season goes on and as the offseason goes on, I'll bring more baseball guys on to talk about. You know, I'm really trying to get my friend Tommy Weber on the podcast, who's a huge baseball guy who really knows a lot more than I do about the, everything going on. You know, he's told me multiple times before, he's messaged me before, I've talked about it before on this podcast, that he could go on about how the Yankees from the top down are just not run well and not built to win a World Series and will continue to be exposed. And that's how he feels. And I see it happening, but I also see the pieces right in front of you where I don't know. I'm not well versed enough in the baseball world to sit here and tell you my answer. But from the little I do know, I know the two biggest things, in my opinion, you have to do is go get Bellinger back, fix that rotation, and I don't see why the window is still open. Is the window closing 100%? Like I said, Aaron Judge is 34. The window's closing 110%. The window is closing, but I think there's ways to work around and keep Aaron Boone and just have opportunities to win a World Series. You have the opportunity there. You do. You do. Moving on from baseball, though, we had a crazy week this week in the NFL. Crazy week. A lot of upsets, as happens in the middle of the season. We get to this point of the year. I said this last week. It's hard to win 4, 5, 6 games in a row. It's hard to lose 4, 5, 6 games in a row. Only one team has lost the first 6 games of the season. And I will talk about them a little bit, but I want to talk about Thursday night. I know it's been almost a week as I come on here on Tuesdays. I'm always late to the Thursday night train, but it's a game I definitely want to talk about, obviously. The New York Giants came out on a short week and surprised everyone. The short week, I will say, throw it out there, affects everyone. So, just as much as it affected the Philadelphia Eagles, it affected the New York Giants and vice versa. It's all about how you handle that short week. And, these were two teams coming off tough losses in week 5. The Giants with that 5 turnover, absolute, what looked like an absolute fall apart in New Orleans against the New Orleans Saints. And you had the Eagles in that tough loss against the Denver Broncos last week, going into this short week against the New York Giants in New York on prime time. And everyone wondered what would happen. And what we saw on primetime was something that the New York Giants have been waiting to see for a very, very long time. And a lot of people are talking about it. And as someone who I love this opportunity, and I knew that this was going to come up at some point while I worked here or while I did this simultaneously with the podcast. I love working at the store that I do on the side, because I get to see what I get to talk to a lot of fans and really, gauge how different fan bases are feeling. It being a store that carries not only local teams, but, all sports teams. I really get to gauge a lot of different fans and how individual fan bases and individual fans are feeling about their teams. And the energy that I am feeling, not only among my friends, but Giants fans as a whole, is absolutely amazing. And I talked about it before. Cam Scatabo had a quote about it, and it's just the energy that Jackson Dart and Cam Scatabo bring to this offense is something else, and it's something that will develop into a winning culture in New York as long as the Giants are also patient with it. Rome wasn't built in a day. A winning culture is not built in a day. But the energy to see that winning culture is seen from day one. And the minute that Russell Wilson was sat for Jackson Dart, as much as I will say, and I will stand by the point that it very much could have been way too early, and we saw that against the New Orleans Saints, the opportunity of the mistakes that Jackson Dart can make, and the fact that it could be way too early. But we saw the flip side of it on Thursday night. We saw all of MetLife behind Jackson Dart in a big primetime game against the former champions, the Philadelphia Eagles, against a former New York Giant, Saquon Barkley, who, yes, has been having a rough season. A lot of people are saying the Madden curse, this and that. But yes, Saquon Barkley's been, but nonetheless, the New York Giants, the whole team just seems to be playing with a new energy. You have Jackson Dart go out there and, throw for almost 200 yards. He had a buck 95, had 2 total touchdowns, had that 20-yard rushing touchdown to start the game, and then had that amazing pass touchdown to Wan'Dale Robinson. So you have that, and then on the other side, you have this. I'm going to have fun with this explanation. You have this little ball of energy as your running back in number 44. This dude that I can describe as none other then he's just so mad in the head, so insane, has such a thick skull and such a craving for football, for what the sport of football is. He's such a pure gridiron player in Cam Skattebo, a dude who just craves contact, who just craves big plays and energy plays that even when I go back, I remember I had kids in high school on my football team who were like this, who played like this. And on a 4-yard gain, when you're a lineman who's making a block and it's a a light 4-yard gain, and you see this kid put his head down and try to run through 6 people, man, does that get you hyped. It's a team energy. You know, people say this all the time, and it's true. You know, it's a brotherhood. It's a brotherhood on the football field. You know, you need that camaraderie to really be a good football team, because when you have that camaraderie and you have a player like Cam Skattebo, what you have with him is when he sits there and he puts his shoulder down and tries to run through 5 people for the good of the team, it makes you want to do the same thing. It makes everybody on the team have that next step of energy. And it's just such a big piece for the team that it brings this new sense of confidence that you're seeing in the New York Giants. You know, Cam Skattebo, a kid who really just got this opportunity after the Tyrone Tracy injury to really take over this running back position and has become a fan favorite for the New York Giants, is the highest selling jersey for the New York Giants right now. It's him and Jackson Dart are the 2 highest selling jerseys in the New York, New Jersey area right now. You know, he has 3 touchdowns in a primetime game on Thursday night with 98 yards, and constantly not taking big hits, giving the big hits as a running back. You know, it reminds you of a player that not a lot of people from, even my generation might not remember, but it reminds you of like a little Mike Allstat or a Steven Jackson or, a Frank Gore, these players that just small and stout and will get you 4 yards a carry. And like I said, it brings such a confidence to the locker room. And not only that, a young new swagger to the locker room with Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo. And something else I think going forward that you saw in this Thursday night game that I think is going to be huge for Jackson Dart throughout this year, in a way, the Malik Nabers injury, as good as a player Malik Nabers is, and they can't wait to have him back, I think it could have been a blessing in disguise, because what it's going to do now is give Lil Jordan Humphrey his time to play. And what you saw on Thursday night was Jackson Dart, because throughout the offseason didn't get a ton of reps with that number 1 offense, with the first team. He now has a receiver in Lil Jordan Humphrey who wasn't the leading receiver like Wandell was on Thursday night, but he had 58 yards on 7 targets. He was looked at a lot, and it's because Jackson Dart now has a receiver out there that he built a rapport with in Lil Jordan Humphrey. So I think that's someone to look at for you fantasy players. Maybe pick him up, because I think as this Giants offense develops throughout the year, as huge targets for Jackson Dart that he'll love to go to throughout this year, because they're players that he built rapport with when he was working with the twos throughout the offseason and throughout training camp and all of that. So I think that in a weird way, this Malik Nabers injury could have been a blessing in disguise for the New York Giants, because you see now Dart has it felt like a newfound confidence on Thursday night, where when you saw a hint of it in the New Orleans game where he started to look at Lil Jordan Humphrey, but you really saw the production of it for you really saw the emergence of it. I apologize. You saw the emergence of it on Thursday night against the Philadelphia Eagles. And, obviously the energy for Jackson Dart, the energy of Cam Skattebo helps, because you got to load the box when Cam Scadaboo's playing like he did on Thursday night. And that opens up the offense. When you have a little ball of energy like Cam Scadaboo, that opens up the offense. You see what Christian McCaffrey does for teams. You see what Derrick Henry does for teams. You see what players like I'm not comparing him to Bijan Robinson because I think he's the exact opposite of Bijan Robinson, but what players like that can do for a team, what stars out of the backfield can do for a team and make an impact of a team when you could have someone who can run the ball so well. I think there are still things to work on for Jackson Dart. And obviously, you're only in game 4 right now as an NFL starter. So I think, obviously, there's a lot of things to work on. I think he's still got some happy feet back there. I think he can be a little more poised in the pocket. Like I said, he gets too excited and he likes to move a lot. I think there's that to work on. I think another big thing to work on is he'll have to protect his body a little bit more. But things like that will come with time for Jackson Dart. And as we now sit here 3 games in for Jackson Dart, I think we've seen a lot of positives. We've seen the negatives that you see out of a rookie, but I think the Giants know what they have now, and that's someone with a whole lot of potential. A whole lot of potential. And you get this big win on Thursday night that really keeps you alive for this season. Honestly, I think the win on Thursday night might save Daboll's job as a whole. The look running into the medical tent, that is not a good look. That is not a good look, Daboll. Daboll running over there going, my job. That's what that was. That was a bad one. Just looking over there like, no. And then for some reason, I think people talked about this with Baker Mayfield when he was in Cleveland. Why are you having Russell Wilson, who struggled all year, first play in, has 1 pass? It's a play-action deep shot? Like, you're just trying to make Russ look bad. Like, as he's getting booed to walk on the field, we're like, yeah, let's chuck it downfield with him. So, I don't know about all that, but you got something here for the New York Giants, and you get a big win in Week 6 there. You're going into Denver to see how Denver looks. I think that's a big game. Obviously, they just got a win over the New York Jets in one of the ugliest football games ever produced on football. That 13-11 win over the Jets. So, nonetheless, I think it's a huge win for the New York Giants. I think it's absolutely giant. But that was just the kickoff of Week 6, man. That was just the start of all of what Week 6 was. Obviously for the Eagles, you run into this back-to-back losses for the Eagles. Saquon, another dud on the ground for Saquon, only 58 yards. He only has 1 game above 60. 2 games, if you want to say 60 plus, because he had 60 the first game of the year, 88 the second game of the year. Hasn't eclipsed that point since then. So Saquon is struggling heavily, and that's really tough for the Eagles offense to not have that weapon. And what you have out of Hurts is interesting. It really is. To see where Hurts could go here. I think I'm higher on Hurts than a lot of people are. I think Hurts is a lot better than a lot of people think. But, he was definitely forced into some mistakes. I think defensively the Eagles took a lot more hits than people think. Like that, or than people realized at least. I think I know a lot of people now are seeing it, but losing Josh Sweat, losing a lot of those key pieces for the Philadelphia Eagles seems to have really made an impact on that defense that really is struggling this year. So, they're still one of the top teams in the NFC. The Buccaneers are also playing well. Packers are playing absolutely well. So the NFC, I feel, is wide open right now, as well as the AFC. We're only in Week 6. We still are only in Week 6, as much as I say that these games get more and more important, obviously, as the days go on. But we are still not at that point where we know what's what. We feel who's confident. Even on that, you get the Bills last night. The Bills have a tough loss last night against the Atlanta Falcons. where you have the Atlanta Falcons look absolutely great in a 24-14 win over the Bills on Monday night. The Bills are now not even leading their division. You know, you have the Patriots at first in the NFC East right now. Josh Allen plays bad because Josh Allen has the worst QBR of his formatting, I would say, you have left in the NFL. You have a lot of interesting things up right now. You get the Bears get a big win last night, and you look at going into week 7, you look at this NFL playoff picture, and it is nothing like anyone would expect. You have the Colts and Buccaneers as the 2 top seeds. You have the Steelers and the Packers as the number 2 seeds, both sitting at 4. The Steelers sitting at 4-1. The Packers sitting at 3-1-1. You got the Chargers in front of the AFC West. You have no Chiefs in the playoffs. Broncos in the playoffs. Jaguars are in. You know, you got a lot of fun stuff happening. So to see how this year develops is going to be very, 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 very interesting. You know, there was a lot of fun stuff that happened in week 7. Or in week 6, a lot of fun stuff, a lot of big stuff that's gonna happen this week. This week's a big week as we have Bucks, Lions, Eagles, Vikings, Giants trying to bounce back. You have the Colts versus the Chargers, 2 teams that are in front of their divisions right now, 2 teams that have been playing exceptionally well right now. Yeah, and then the biggest news in the NFL, talking about not only that, on the flip side of it, you have the Titans firing Brian Callahan. And as much as I do want to talk about week 7, I really do want to get into that firing for a little bit here. As the Titans make that decision yesterday to fire Brian Callahan, I think it's a really interesting one because I think as we look at the landscape of the NFL now, you look at an NFL where you've had 6 of the last 8 NFL quarterbacks that have been drafted number 1 overall have a head coach fired in their first year. And I think, I don't know if it's the emergence of social media and this win now mentality that so many like this win immediately mentality that so many teams have with these star quarterbacks, because you've seen these rookie phenoms now pop up and be good from day one in the NFL. But I think when you look at it, I don't know. I think it's very bad for Cam Ward what has happened. Yes, the team fell to 1-5, and it's not looking good after, you know, you have the number 1 overall pick and you fall to 1-5. But when I look at the 6 of the last 8 quarterbacks taken number 1 overall that had these head coaches fired, you had Jared Goff in 2016. Jeff Fisher was fired. Baker Mayfield had Hugh Jackson fired in year 1. Trevor Lawrence, you had Urban Meyer fired in year 1. Bryce Young, you have Frank Reich. Caleb Williams, you have Matt Eberflus last year. And then Cam Ward this year with Brian Callahan. It's so difficult with all this turnover. You know, the NFL to a college game is not an easy transition. So with all this turnover that you're seeing these players have, I almost feel bad for them because it's hard to develop when your play caller's switching every year and the offense is switching year. You have a new front office every year. You have so much turnover within your franchise, and the franchise that you're a part of is so disorganized and dysfunctional that it makes it hard to develop. And you look throughout history, you look now who he had 28 interception his rookie year, was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, but they took their time with him and trusted the coaching staff to develop him. Going even far back on some legendary quarterbacks, Troy Aikman struggled in his rookie year. Terry Bradshaw struggled in this rookie year. So many great quarterbacks have struggled so young in their career that I feel so bad for Cam Ward right now because we don't know. I think I always say this about rookie quarterbacks. You have to give them a year or 2 with their system, and you have to give the guy you hired a chance with his guy. And over again, we've seen time and time again, we just see that doesn't happen anymore. Teams are too impatient, and they don't give quarterbacks time to develop with their head coach. And yes, there's 2 sides of the coin because there are teams that happen to do it with Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray. You know, you gave him 2 years and you saw no improvement. That's where you make the firing. I didn't hate that decision of Cliff Kingsbury because you had given him the time to see Kyler Murray develop and you saw no progress in Kyler Murray. But when you look at like especially these players like a Cam Ward and Caleb Williams and Baker Mayfield. 3 great examples, and Baker Mayfield is the example of what could happen when you trust the dude and you give him time to develop within an offense and learn the NFL, because he had so much turnover early in his career, Baker Mayfield, and he struggled so much and still had some success in Cleveland and making the playoffs and all this, but still had so much turnover. And then he finally gets to a system that trusts him. And as he develops in the system, he's only gotten better in Tampa Bay. You look at Jared Goff, who struggled early, and then as he got under Sean McVay and developed, they started to do well, and they made a Super Bowl. And even though they lost it, he is now in Detroit with a team that trusts him and an offense with the same head coach. Yes, your offense coordinator just got poached, but he wasn't getting fired. And he's found success. And you see these raw talents, like I'm going to use the last 2 years of example, with Caleb Williams and with Cam Ward. And I feel so bad for these guys because they're such raw talents. You know, they're players that their ceilings are so high. Caleb Williams and Cam Ward have extremely high ceilings based off what we saw on the college level, based off what we saw on film on their pro days, and so much out of them. But also, because they've had so much success, they're going to make decisions that don't fly in the NFL. And you need this dude that, yes, trusts them, but someone that has the rapport with Cam Ward to look him in the eyes and be able to say that to him. And head coaches will build that with their rookie quarterback, and you have to trust that out of your head coach. When you fire these guys in their first year, you know, out of these 6, I'm going to throw the Trevor Lawrence one aside because the whole Urban Meyer situation was a whole different story. I feel bad, especially for a Caleb Williams and a Cam Ward, because you know, it's hard to have this turnover time and time again for these guys. And it's hard to develop under that. And you have so much potential, but you have such a low floor as well because of the style of play, the flashiness of your style of play that you've depended on for so long. And when you have this turnover with, you know, you bring in a guy that, you have to do what the Bears did in their interview, or at least was rumored out of the Bears in their interview in that situation with Ben Johnson, where Ben Johnson was hired for Caleb. He was hired for no other reason but to develop Caleb Williams. You know, you have to hire that guy, but you also have the backhand of they didn't draft him. He's on so much of a shorter leash. Whoever is brought into Tennessee, especially if it's like a defensive guy, he's going to be on. Cam Ward will be on so much of a shorter leash. And to see how that develops, I talked about it with Jackson Dart, that Dable's trying to save his job, and if Dable got fired, it's bad for Dart. It's bad when you have this turnover consistently as an NFL quarterback. You know, obviously the decision was made by the front office. We'll see how the interim head coach does. I do this every time a team fires their head coach. I pick them to win this week because usually they get behind whoever is picked as the interim guy. A team usually gets behind a firing of after the firing of a head coach and plays well. So I do have them winning this week nonetheless, but look at who they hire, because for this to work well, it has to be an offensive guru, or Cam Ward's in a bad situation, man. In a bad spot. It's not going to be his guy. And he's going to be on a short leash. And the minute he plays bad, it's going to be like Carolina with Bryce Young, and they're not going to give him a chance. You see, Bryce Young's even hitting his stride now. It takes time to learn, man. It takes time to learn. Not everybody's going to pick up a football and be this natural stud from day one. You got to give these guys time. You got to give these guys time. As we go into week 7, I talked about my big 4 games. Buccaneers, Lions on Monday night. That one's going to be a huge one. Baker, big MVP candidate right now. The Lions, obviously a heavyweight after the way they played last year. Coming off a big loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, they're going to want to bounce back. That's going to be a big game. You got Eagles, Vikings. The Eagles need a win after 2 straight losses. But in Minnesota, can the Vikings play well? No J.J. McCarthy possibly. So that one's a fun one to look at. The Giants looking to put together another win, traveling into Denver. I think that's a fun game for the week. And then another big game for the week, Colts-Chargers, I think should be game of the week. All eyes should be on that game. Two teams that are at the top of the AFC are playing some of their best football right now. So I think that one will be a great game to watch. To give some of y'all some picks for the week as I close out my show, my lock of the week will be the Titans. Betting wise, they are 7-point underdogs in New England. Yes, New England is playing well right now, but like I said, NFL teams tend to play well with this head coach bump that I know so well. Be my lock of the, or that will be my upset of the week. And then my lock of the week is the Seahawks playing the Texans at home -3. I think that should be larger. I think the Seahawks are playing very well right now. Sam Darnold's playing very well right now, and I see the exact opposite out of Houston. So I'm going to take Seattle in that one, but let me know who you guys have as your lock of the week. Let me know what parlays and stuff like that you guys might be posting. I'm always into that stuff. Also, as I close out here, a question for you guys. Leave it in the comments. Leave it in the chat. Let me know if you know me personally. You guys want me to start talking about fantasy and betting on the show? I will add a section for it. I'll definitely talk about it a little bit more every week. Not only that, I know I say this a lot, but I'm really trying to lock into this YouTube content soon. So everyone pay attention to the YouTube page, please, because I'm going to start trying to really lock in, hone some ideas, and hopefully get some YouTube videos out for everyone coming up soon. But that is all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for everybody who tuned in, everybody who tunes in after I'm live late on the YouTube. I appreciate every single one of you. Every view counts, as I love to do this. I love to talk about sports every week. I talk about them every day, but I love to talk about them here on the internet, just spew my thoughts once a week. I love it. Thank you guys so much for viewing. Everyone check out the TikTok, Instagram, all at The Log Show. Instagram is at The Log Show _. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube already, please do. Like I said, every subscriber, every view is appreciated, does count, means a lot to me. That is all I got for you guys. See you next week.